15 years had passed without even a handshake. My name's Harvey Wilson. I'm 51 and I work as a senior driver for High Hail Syndicate Freight out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. I've been with them since the days when they only had 3 trucks and a big dream. Now, they run 28 rigs, have contracts with some of the largest distributors in the Midwest, and recently brought in a new operations manager who clearly had no clue about loyalty. When High Hail was sold to an investment firm last spring, I knew changes were coming. Just didn't expect they'd start by cutting me loose. The new ops manager, Darren Kelly, was a slick MBA type who'd never set foot inside a truck cab for weeks. He'd been eyeing my paycheck, making snide remarks about legacy costs during meetings that morning. After pulling in on time from a 3-day haul to Denver as usual, Darren summoned me to his glass-walled office. The termination papers were already printed and waiting. Meanwhile, my replacement, some fresh-faced kid straight out of driving school, was sitting in the break room. "We need to streamline operations," Darren said, avoiding eye contact. "It's nothing personal, just numbers. Your salary is almost double what we can pay a new driver." I nodded silently. Didn't argue I didn't mention that Thompson Foods had been shipping exclusively with us for 8 years because I helped their dock manager move his mother's furniture when her nursing home closed. Nor did I tell him that Western Distributing kept renewing their contract 3 times because I always found a way to handle their emergency shipments, even on holidays. 15 years of perfect safety records, never missing a delivery window, and knowing every client by name didn't seem to matter. "Severance is 2 weeks, Darren continued, sliding the papers across the desk. "Company policy." I signed without reading, handed over my keys, security badge, and company credit card, and quietly said thanks for the opportunity outside. I sat in my pickup truck for nearly an hour, not angry, just reflecting on the clients who'd become almost like friends over the years, the Christmas cards from shipping managers across 6 states, and how Darren didn't understand that in this business, shipments moved on relationships as much as on diesel fuel. My phone buzzed. A text from Bill Thompson himself. "Heard what happened, those corporate idiots called me." Then another from Jerry at Western. "Is it true you're leaving? Let's talk before you make any decisions." By the time I drove out of High Hail's lot, 3 more messages had arrived. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I drove home and sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the Oklahoma plains orange. They'd fired a driver but lost something far more valuable. I started at High Hail when it was just old man Jenkins and his son building something from scratch. Jenkins taught me everything: how to navigate icy mountain passes, how to speak to clients, how to solve problems on the road without calling in. "This freight business isn't about trucks," he'd say. "It's about trust." For 15 years, I'd earned that trust mile by mile. When the 2016 ice storm crippled Kansas City, I was the one who delivered medical supplies to 3 hospitals. When floods washed out the main highway to Wichita, I found the back roads. When Thompson Foods needed emergency packaging after a warehouse fire, I drove nonstop for 36 hours to get it there. My wife Elaine understood the grind. Sometimes I was gone for days, but I always returned with stories. Our kids grew up with me on the road half the time, but they never doubted I'd be there for the big moments. Missed some baseball games, sure, but never graduations or birthdays. When Jenkins sold the company 5 years ago, the changes began slowly. More paperwork, stricter policies, less flexibility. The new management kept me on only because clients requested me by name. "Send Harvey," they'd say. "If he's driving, it'll get there." Darren showed up 6 months ago, fresh from some big logistics firm in Chicago. He started preaching efficiency metrics and driver rotation, questioning why some clients set their own delivery windows and why Thompson Foods got special treatment. "They're not our biggest account," he'd argue. "No," I'd say, "but they're our most loyal. Been with us since the start." He'd smile that corporate smile, Dismissing loyalty as something invisible on a balance sheet, I noticed the cracks appearing. I heard whispers about rate hikes for our oldest clients. I saw Darren hiring drivers based on the lowest wages. Not skills. I watched him cut corners on maintenance 3 weeks ago after he yelled at Dave, one of our best mechanics, for spending time on preventative work. I pulled Darren aside. "You're going to lose good people," I warned. He laughed. "Everyone's replaceable, Harvey. That's business 101. I didn't argue, just went back to doing what I knew, checking in with clients, making deliveries, keeping things moving while the foundation crumbled beneath us. I had no idea I'd be the first to go. After an hour on the porch, I finally checked my messages. Bill Thompson wanted to meet for coffee tomorrow. Jerry from Western asked if I planned to drive elsewhere. Maria at Lakeland Food sent a string of angry emojis, then, "Call me." I went inside, brewed coffee, and sat at the kitchen table. Elaine was working late at the hospital. The house felt too quiet. I pulled out my logbooks. 15 years of roots, deliveries, and relationships. High Ale didn't own those. They'd fired the driver, but forgotten the connections I'd built. The phone rang. It was Jenkins. Must have heard through the grapevine. "Damn shame what they're doing to my company," he said, voice rough with age and anger. "I never should have sold." "You did what you had to," I replied. "Your wife's medical bills." "Still," he grumbled, "I built that place on relationships, not spreadsheets. These new boys don't get the business." After we hung up, I stared at my hands, calloused and worn from years of driving, loading, and solving problems. 15 years wiped away with one signature. The next morning, I met Bill Thompson at Riverside Cafe. He didn't waste time. "I heard what happened," he said, sliding into the booth. "A bunch of idiots. You've saved our bacon more times than I can count." "Just doing my job," I said. "No," Bill shook his head. "You did more than your job. Remember when our cooling system failed at the Broken Arrow warehouse? You got that shipment to our backup facility at 2 a.m. in a snowstorm." I shrugged. "Freight doesn't wait for good weather." Bill leaned in. "We have a contract with High Ale, but it has a 30-day termination clause. Who are you driving for next? Because that's where our business is going." I hadn't even thought that far yet, but Bill's words planted a seed. By the time lunchtime rolled around, I'd already met with Jerry from Western, who basically echoed the same message. Come evening, 3 additional clients reached out with nearly identical concerns. As I drove home that night, I passed the High Ale yard and noticed my old truck, now reassigned to that rookie driver, peering through the office windows. I spotted Darren standing in a meeting, pointing at charts projected on a screen. That moment it all sank in. Darren treated drivers like interchangeable cogs in a machine, but the clients saw us as people, as relationships. For a decade and a half, I'd been the face of High Ale to many of our key accounts. I wasn't simply a driver. I was their trusted ally. Pulling into my driveway, my thoughts raced. I dialed my friend Frank, who had left High Ale last year to join a rival firm. What would it take to launch our own company? I asked him. He was quiet for a beat. "You're serious about this, Harvey?" "More serious than ever." He began ticking off essentials: capital, licenses, insurance, and clients, I cut in, which I've got lined up. Later that night, Elaine found me at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers and figures. "What's all this?" she asked. I answered slowly. "I'm starting a freight business." 3 days after getting the boot, I returned to High Ale's office, not to plead for my job, that chapter was closed, but to gather my personal belongings from the locker and catch up with a few drivers I'd mentored. Darren spotted me in the break room chatting with Doug and Alejandro, 2 of the drivers who'd started under my guidance. His expression darkened as he stormed over. "Harvey, this is private property," he snapped. "You can't just come in here and disrupt things." "I'm just collecting my stuff," I replied, holding up my old thermos and the family photo from my locker. While bidding farewell to friends, Darren folded his arms. I heard you've been contacting our clients, so that's what this is about. They reached out to me, I corrected, asking why I'm no longer handling their deliveries. Cut it out, Darren barked. Those are high-hail accounts. Interfering with client relationships could be considered tortious interference. He said it like he'd practiced with a lawyer. Maybe he had. I can't control who calls me, I said evenly, or what choices they make about their shipping. Darren stepped closer. Listen up, Harvey. When you joined High-Hail, you signed non-compete and non-solicitation agreements. If you try to poach clients, we'll bury you in legal fees. This caught me off guard, and I sure couldn't afford a legal fight. Check your facts, I said, remembering something important. Those agreements expired after 10 years. Jenkins made sure of that. Darren's face flushed, clearly unprepared. Still, he recovered. This is your one and only warning. Stay away from our clients. I nodded, grabbed my things, and left outside. Doug and Alejandro caught up with me. He's running this place into the ground, Doug muttered, cutting maintenance corners, pushing drivers to break hours of service rules. 3 guys quit last week, Alejandro added, replaced by rookies willing to work for peanuts. I'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed churned my stomach, not only for the business but for safety. Sloppy upkeep and overworked drivers spelled disaster. Be careful, you two, I warned. Back at home, I called Jenkins to confirm about the agreements. He backed up my memory. The non-compete and non-solicitation clauses had long since expired. I never believed in locking folks down forever, he said. Good business is about choice, not chains. The next day, a certified letter arrived from High-Hail's lawyers, threatening legal action if I continued soliciting clients. Pure intimidation tactics. They had no real case, but hoped I wouldn't know or couldn't fight. That same afternoon, Bill Thompson called, furious. High-Hail had just tried to hike our rates by 15% with zero explanation. When I dropped your name, their sales rep got all nervous. One by one, similar calls poured in. High-Hail was scrambling, using heavy-handed tactics and sudden rate hikes to lock down clients. Classic desperation moves. That evening, Frank showed up with pizza and beer. We sat on my back deck, hammering out a business plan. He'd already researched insurance, licensing, and startup costs. The numbers were intimidating, but not impossible, especially if we began small with 2 or 3 trucks. We'll need a solid base of guaranteed contracts, Frank said. Taking a long pull of beer, I glanced at my phone, buzzing with client messages all day. I don't think that's going to be a problem. A week later, I sat in a tiny office I'd rented in an industrial park on Tulsa's east side. Frank had dipped into his 401k I'd pulled from savings together. We'd secured financing for 2 trucks. It wasn't much compared to High-Hail's massive fleet, but it was a start. We filed paperwork for Wilson and Reynolds Freight LLC, applied for our DOT authority, and arranged insurance. Costly, but our clean driving records helped. We even found a decent used truck due to arrive next week. What I hadn't expected was a call from Patty Hale's longtime dispatcher. "Harvey, you got a minute?" Her voice was low, as if she were hiding. "Always, Patty. What's up?" "It's worse than you know," she whispered. "After you left, Darren brought in some consultant who's been combing through contracts, looking for ways to squeeze more money out of everyone." I heard papers rustling, but that's not the worst part. They're planning to shut down Tulsa operations in 6 months, move everything to Kansas City because of some tax deal. Everyone here will be laid off. They just don't know it yet. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. High-Hail had been a Tulsa staple for decades. 40-plus families depended on those jobs. "How sure are you?" I asked. 100%. I saw the documents myself when filing. Darren left them out. Careless. They're already scouting warehouse space in Kansas City. After she hung up, I sat at my empty desk, staring at the wall. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all the people who'd be blindsided in half a year. Frank arrived with coffee and donuts, excited about a used Peterbilt he'd found at a good price. But he froze when he saw my face. "What's wrong?" I told him what Patty had said. His expression hardened. "So all this talk about efficiency and streamlining was just a smokescreen," he said. "They plan to dump everyone anyway." "Sounds like it." Frank sat down, forgetting his coffee. "We need to think bigger, Harvey." "What do you mean?" "If they're closing down in 6 months anyway, we need to prepare to take over as much of their business as possible, not just a few clients here and there, all of it." He was right. This had ceased to be about getting back at Darren or salvaging my own career. It was about protecting what Jenkins had built, the relationships, the trust, and the livelihoods of the people involved. We spent the rest of the day revising our business plan, called our bank contact about financing more trucks, and researched warehouse spaces that could serve as a modest terminal. By evening, our plan was evolving into something far bigger than the original 2-truck idea. The next morning, I reached out to Jenkins and asked him to meet for lunch. I laid out everything: what Patty had told me, what Frank and I were planning, and the obstacles ahead. The old man listened quietly, hands folded on the table. When I finished, he nodded once and asked, "How much do you need?" "Startup capital, sir. I've got some savings put aside. Was planning on buying a fishing boat, but this feels more important." I hadn't expected his response. "We can't ask you to," I said. "You're not asking," Jenkins interrupted. "I'm offering most of those folks at High Hail I hired myself. I know their families. I won't stand by while some corporate vulture scatters them." He pulled out his checkbook right there in the restaurant. "Let's build something the right way this time, something that lasts." Over the next 2 weeks, Wilson, Reynolds, and Jenkins Freight sprang to life with surprising speed. Jenkins's investment, combined with our resources and a business loan, gave us enough capital to lease 5 trucks, secure a small terminal with a warehouse, and hire key staff. We started with the essentials. Patty resigned from High Hail and joined us as dispatcher. 2 experienced mechanics followed. Fed up with High Hail's shortcuts on maintenance, we hired 5 drivers, all veterans with stellar safety records who had either already left High Hail or were planning to. The trucks arrived: 3 Peterbilts and 2 Kenworths, not flashy but dependable machines. We painted them midnight blue with silver trim, proudly displaying our new company logo on the doors each morning. I'd arrive before dawn at our modest terminal and feel a swell of pride seeing those trucks lined up, ready to roll. Meanwhile, High Hail was unraveling. After I left, 3 major clients pulled their business, not to us yet, but to competitors. They cited service concerns, but mostly they were waiting to see if our operation could handle their needs. News of the Kansas City move had leaked. Morale at High Hail was rock bottom. Drivers were quitting weekly. Deliveries were slipping. Darren panicked, slashing rates to keep clients while cutting corners everywhere else. We moved cautiously, building infrastructure before taking on too much business. Jenkins insisted we do it right: proper training, thorough maintenance, fair pay. "The money will follow if we focus on quality," he kept saying. By week 3, we were ready to approach clients directly. I started with Thompson Foods, my longest-standing relationship. Bill Thompson met me in his office, scrutinizing rate sheets, insurance certificates, and driver qualifications, grilling me on capacity and contingency plans. "This all looks solid, Harvey," he said finally. "But High Hail just dropped their rates below yours. They're desperate to keep us." "Those rates aren't sustainable," I replied. "And they can't match our service also. You should know about the Kansas City move." Bill's face darkened. "So all their promises of local service and quick responses are lies once they relocate?" He nodded slowly. "We'll need to phase this carefully. No supply chain disruptions." "We've got a plan," I assured him. outlining our gradual transition strategy. By the meeting's end, we'd sealed a handshake deal. Thompson Foods would shift 20% of their shipping to us immediately, with the rest transitioning over 60 days. Similar talks played out with Western Distributing, Lakeland Foods, and 6 other major clients, not all signed right away, but most started moving business our way. We weren't just winning clients. We were gaining people every week. Another high-hail employee approached us for work. We couldn't hire them all, but took the best: dispatchers, mechanics, dependable drivers. Then came the moment that confirmed we were on the right track. Doug, a driver I'd mentored still at High Hail, called one evening. "Harvey, you won't believe it. Darren just lost the Cornerstone Builder account." Cornerstone was High Hail's biggest client, 30% of their business. "What happened?" I asked. "They found out about the Kansas City move from a contact at Western," Doug said. "They've already signed elsewhere." "Who with?" "National Logistics," Doug laughed. "And Darren's running around blaming you, but everyone knows it's his fault." Our plan was working better than we imagined. We didn't need to aggressively poach High Hail's business. The company was collapsing on its own. 2 months after being fired, I was back behind the wheel, delivering a critical shipment to Thompson Foods. Their main production line broke down and they needed replacement parts by morning, just like old times. Except now the truck had my name on the door. Pulling up to Thompson's loading dock at 4 a.m., Bill was waiting despite the hour. "You're a lifesaver, Harvey," he said as I handed him the manifest. Their production manager said they could be back online within 2 hours. I helped unload, then joined Bill for coffee in his office. He seemed distracted, checking his phone often. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just waiting for confirmation on something," he said, pouring coffee. Then his phone buzzed. He read the message and smiled. "It's official. As of this morning, we've terminated our contract with High Hail. You're handling 100% of our freight now." I expected this. We'd been gradually taking on more of their business, but hearing it finalized still felt huge. "Thanks for your trust," I said simply. "Trust is why you got it," Bill replied. "But you're not the only one." Western Distributing cut ties yesterday, Lakeland Foods the day before. From what I hear, High Hail's lost 80% of its Tulsa business in the past 6 weeks. Driving back to our terminal, I passed High Hail's yard. The lot was half empty, and a "For Lease" sign hung on the fence through the office window. I spotted Darren on the phone, gesturing wildly. Surprisingly, I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. Instead, there was a quiet calm, an understanding that things were unfolding as they should. We hadn't stolen anything. We had just created something better, something rooted in the values that truly mattered in this business. Back at our terminal, Jenkins greeted me in the break room. "Have you heard?" he asked. "About High Hail losing most of their clients," I replied. Jenkins shook his head gravely. "More than that. They're declaring bankruptcy effective immediately." 6 months after getting the boot from High Hail, I stood in the yard of Wilson, Reynolds, and Jenkins Freight, watching our fleet, now 15 trucks strong, roll out for the day's deliveries. Our modest terminal had grown to include a full warehouse and maintenance shop. We employed 32 people, many of them former High Hail workers. High Hail Syndicate Freight was no more following bankruptcy. Their assets were liquidated and contracts dispersed among competitors. We'd snagged 3 of their trucks at auction, solid machines though poorly cared for. Our mechanics spent weeks restoring them to roadworthy condition. Darren was gone. Last I heard, he took a job with a Phoenix logistics firm. The investment group that bought High Hail from Jenkins had written the whole venture off as a loss. Jenkins joined me in the yard, leaning on his cane. At 73, he wasn't involved in daily operations but dropped by most mornings for coffee with drivers and to share his wisdom. "Never thought I'd be back in freight," he mused, watching a Peterbilt pull away loaded with industrial gear bound for Kansas City. Got regrets? I asked. He laughed. Hell, no, best choice I've made in years. We headed back inside where Patty was coordinating that day's routes, and Frank reviewed maintenance plans with our lead mechanic. The place buzzed with focused energy. You know what makes this work? Jenkins said, pouring another coffee. It's not the trucks, contracts, or money, it's the people. He was right. We'd built something valuable because we prioritized what truly mattered. That afternoon, I took a rare day off, driving out to the lake with Elaine. We sat on the dock with fishing poles, not really caring if we caught anything. Happy? She asked simply. I thought for a moment, watching sunlight dance on the water. Yeah, I said, I am. Sometimes the long haul isn't about the miles. It's about the journey back to what matters.